This is Matthew Cratter from Trader University, and today I want to talk about how Bitcoin just took a position in Square. If you're interested in learning how to make money in both bull and bear markets, or you just want to see what I'm trading or investing in, be sure to hit that subscribe button. So, minutes after I recorded this Bitcoin on track for 100,000 price target video, the news was released that Square, which is one of the companies run by Jack Dorsey, they announced that they had just purchased $50 million worth of Bitcoin. This comes out to approximately 1% of their current assets. Obviously, all crypto, especially Bitcoin, was up sharply on this news. I think it's very interesting news simply because we've known for some time that Jack Dorsey loves Bitcoin. Here's a guy who's founded all these companies, and in his Twitter bio up here, the only thing he has is Bitcoin. And there are a lot of smart people in Silicon Valley, people like Peter Thiel, Jack Dorsey. There's a very long list of people that we suspect own Bitcoin. So the first thing I would mention, even before I go into the Square news, is that you have to ask yourself, does Jack Dorsey personally own any Bitcoin? I would guess the answer is yes. I don't know him personally. Then you have to ask yourself, and this is a question that I asked myself 12 months ago, do I own any Bitcoin? Do you own any Bitcoin? Obviously, this isn't investment advice, but here's really a chance to get out ahead of the pack. And if you don't own Bitcoin, you have to ask yourself, do you understand these things better than Jack Dorsey? Are you smarter than Jack Dorsey? Now, the nice thing that Square did is they put out a white paper, which I'll link to, that you can read, talking about why they like Bitcoin so much. They also tell us how many Bitcoin they purchased, 4,709 Bitcoin, an aggregate purchase price of $50 million. This comes out to $10,618 per Bitcoin. So obviously, Jack and Square think this is a fair price. It looks like they sort of dollar cost averaged in on a short time period. I love this tweet from Obi-Wan, and this is where I took my title from. I want to give proper credit. Shortly after its acquisition of Microstrategy, Bitcoin takes a position in Square. This sort of flips things around and makes Bitcoin the actor and the agent rather than these companies. Microstrategy puts so much of their cash into Bitcoin that Bitcoin will overwhelmingly determine MicroStrategy's returns going forward. I did a video on this when it happened. MicroStrategy is another publicly traded NASDAQ company with a very smart CEO who's ahead of the time and into Bitcoin. But I thought this was a nice flipping of the agency, that you don't take a position in Bitcoin, Bitcoin takes a position in you. Obviously a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I think it's a good way of flipping it around and just looking at the power of Bitcoin. I want to give Vulcan Trader credit for alerting me to this tweet. If you're interested in buying cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin in your IRA, Vulcan Trader has a great video right here, which I will link to. There's also another interesting website here that talks about all the Bitcoin in publicly traded companies. The really big one that we've been talking about for a while is obviously MicroStrategy. They put $425 million into Bitcoin. Galaxy Holdings has had Bitcoin for a while, and now Square as one of the other really big publicly traded companies. These companies are much smaller, Riot, Cypherpunk, and people always ask me if they should buy Riot, and my answer always is, well, I don't give investment advice, but do you own Bitcoin itself first? Why buy any of these if you don't own Bitcoin itself? And then obviously the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, which you can also buy in a retirement account, GBTC. Unfortunately, this charges a 2% management fee, and you don't get to actually control your Bitcoin. But it is interesting to see that today they have almost $5 billion in Bitcoin, almost 450,000 Bitcoin. So here's the game theory of Bitcoin, which we've talked about a little bit. Do you want to be one of the first people to buy it, or do you want to be one of the last? And now this question has sort of come home to roost for CFOs of large publicly traded companies, especially if you're a tech company and presumably you understand all things tech. Do you want to be company number 500, for example, in the S&P 500, to purchase Bitcoin, or do you want to be number 3 or 4 or 5. Square, I don't believe Square is part of the S&P 500 or even the NASDAQ 100. It's still a little bit small. But obviously, Microstrategy did it first. It was a smaller company, $1 or $2 billion company. Then Square does it, a multi-billion dollar company. And now you can be sure that in all of the board meetings that everyone's talking about, should we diversify into Bitcoin? You can only imagine when you hear that Apple has put 1% of their cash into Bitcoin, what that will do to Bitcoin's price. But it isn't just corporations that have been acquiring Bitcoin, or we actually don't even know. But this was a great quote from Willy Woo, that these two buys of Bitcoin by Square and by MicroStrategy are just the tip of the iceberg. The last 8 months has seen a reduction of 250,000 Bitcoin from the stockpile that was sitting on exchanges. So this means that people have been withdrawing their Bitcoin, presumably hodling it. We don't know whether these are individuals, retail investors, high net worth investors, corporations, central banks, pensions. We don't really know. Probably not pensions at this point because of the regulation, but it could be other corporations doing this. And the way the game theory works is that it will sort of accelerate. It will reach the point where if you will have violated your fiduciary responsibility to shareholders if you don't have just a small portion of your treasury assets as a corporation in Bitcoin. So you can imagine what this will continue to do to the price of Bitcoin. It really looks like, especially the price action around 10,000, Bitcoin seems to be unable to trade below that for any period of time now. And you can imagine that people thinking, well, if Square paid 10,618 for Bitcoin, then that's a new sort of psychological floor. Obviously, it can trade below that. But if you're getting Bitcoin for below that, you know you're doing better than Square. And so the more corporations that do this, it's going to make it very, very difficult for Bitcoin to go down very much again, especially from these levels, and especially at this point in the 4-year cycle. We're in the most bullish 12 to 18 months of the 4-year cycle. If you want to know where I think Bitcoin's going, you can watch some of my other videos, especially this one about it being on track to go to 100,000 probably before next summer. Finally, I wanted to end with the fact that many of you probably own a tiny sliver of Bitcoin now without knowing it. You can look up which ETFs own Square. So Square owns Bitcoin now, and ETFs own Square shares. And as a result, if you own ARK, the ARK ETF, ARKK, even if you own some Vanguard funds, like the Vanguard Total Stock Market ETF, VTI, VGT, their growth ETF, VUG, you now own some Bitcoin. Even if you own the IWF, which is the Russell 1000 growth company, growth ETF, you now indirectly own Bitcoin through Square. So I think this is extremely bullish news for Bitcoin that Square has done this, and I expect to see many more tech companies announcing that they've purchased Bitcoin in the coming months. So then you have to ask yourself, am I going to wait? At what point am I going to actually step into Bitcoin? Of course, after consulting with a financial advisor and making sure it meets your risk reward, your risk tolerance, and your financial goals. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. And thanks a lot for listening. I'll see you in the next video.